spirituality and monasticism. And for us, as we began to explore Celtic spirituality, which was the spirituality of Northern Britain, Ireland, Wales, Cornwall, Brittany, and parts of northern Spain, in the period roughly from 500 to 900 in the Common Era, Celtic spirituality was a deeply monastic spirituality. So there's a kind of a stepping stone. You start to look at Celtic prayers, Celtic ways of thinking, and you say, well, they organise themselves in monasteries. The fourth thread in this tapestry is what has become known as the home church movement. Face-to-face community. Churches that began from the 1970s onwards, influenced by writers like Robert Banks, who wrote an important book, The Church Comes Home. And the idea was that church needn't be in large institutions or large buildings and structures, but early Christians met as small groups of friends in homes. Now that was another route for us to new monasticism. In 1994, I left traditional ministry in the Baptist Church and was seconded by the Baptist Union of Great Britain to explore home-based churches, and that's what we began to do from 94 onwards. And that was the beginnings of what became the Lindisfarne community. And quite a number of the new monastic movements that are being birthed in the USA are also home-based churches. They celebrate Eucharist in the home, and that's an important element of it. The fifth strand in this tapestry are the monastic disciplines. Now, those of you that have been around a while will remember the kind of stir that Richard Foster caused with his Celebration of Discipline book back in the 80s. And what Richard Foster did was to bring alive again the disciplines that we now know as monastic disciplines. He talked again about the daily disciplines of prayer and fasting and silence and meditation. And when he began to talk about that, it was like a new thing. It was a breath of fresh air coming to the church. And now it's all, kind of passé, really, isn't it? Everybody meditates, don't they? You know what I mean? But then it was new, it was different. And if you follow the trail, once you start to think about these kind of monastic disciplines, then it leads you step by step towards a greater commitment to the monastic way. I forgot how many numbers because I didn't number them, but another 6, John? 6. Thank you. Number 6 is revitalized Catholic monasticism. And the names that you'll be familiar with, you've read the books, Thomas Merton, Thomas Keating, Henry Nouwen, John Michael Talbot. Honourable mention to Dorothy Day and the Catholic Worker Movement, Liberation Theology and the basic ecclesial communities in the late 60s and 70s. I suppose you could say post-Vatican II, the Catholic Church began to see fresh winds blowing through its corridors and cloisters, and part of that was this re-looking at ancient paths, looking at ways that spirituality was developed, and we owe a great deal to the wisdom and insights of people like Merton and Keating now. Something that was added there, I mentioned Dorothy Day and liberation theology, was this thread of social justice that came in with the renewal of monasticism in the Catholic Church. That it's not simply a spiritual renewal movement so we can all feel good about ourselves, but it's actually something that reaches out to the poor and the marginalised, and that's largely a factor now in new monastic communities. I mentioned John Michael Talbot. Some of you will be most familiar with his music. He's quite a phenomenal, gifted musician, songwriter, and you may have even been to a concert or two of his. Again, in the 70s, began to explore what community would be like, and developed what appears to me to be almost a quite traditional now Roman Catholic order, though it's part of the new monasticism. He published a book just last year, which is on the table. I didn't bring it over, and it's one of the best books on the new monasticism, and I think it's one of the best books because it has the depth of the tradition in it. Oh, thank you. It's the Universal Monk there. Yes, and then I can show it around. The Universal Monk, the way of the new monastics, and there's not just theory, but there is lived experience, because they have lived the new monasticism for, I think, 30 years now. And if you were only to buy one book, I would suggest this is the one to buy. Because it's fairly traditional Catholic, some of its commitments are not the ones that I share, particularly on certain social issues, but you can make your mind up about that. The next thread in this tapestry is what I will loosely call the Eastern connection. This evening Scott's going to talk more to us about Buddhist connection. In the 60s, and you'll all be familiar with the Beatles, right? And I grew my hair out in the George Harrison way in homage of that late great musician who plays the ukulele. What we saw with the Beatles